Hi everyone, Mike here with you guys once again. It is time for my Xbox 360 disc-based game collection for 2017. But again, my apologies for the light being so bad in here, but I mean, what else can I do? So just bear with it, okay? And let's get started. Battlefield Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3. Unfortunately, when my friend and I picked up Bad Company 2, the multiplayer was very deserted, and that was really unfortunate because I heard a lot of great things about the multiplayer. But we were able to play a lot of Battlefield 3, and we had fun doing that. And the cool thing about it was, even if you sucked, as long as you did certain tasks, you weren't at the bottom of the leaderboard. So if you threw out med packs, you did repairs and stuff like that, it really helped you from sucking too much. Next up, we have Far Cry 3, and I think this is the game that really made Far Cry such a popular, regular franchise now. Before, Far Cry only came out every few years, but now, ever since this game came out, there have been more Far Cry games and more attention given to the series as a whole. I really like the dark story in this game, and 2012 was, in my opinion, the year of dark stories, especially dark action, gritty action stories. Because this game came out, Spec Ops: The Line came out, and Max Payne 3 came out, and they all have that in common. So if you like that sort of thing, and which I do, definitely pick this one out. Next is Left 4 Dead 2. I was surprised how easy this was. It was so easy to just mow down tons of zombies. Unfortunately, zombies are overplayed out now. I'm tired of them. But back in the day when this came out, it was a lot more fun. My butt. And I mentioned this game a few seconds ago. Spec Ops: The Line. Again, another dark, gritty action and story experience. This one has a lot of surrealness to it, and it's inspired by Heart of Darkness, which is also the same inspiration for Apocalypse Now. So this is what I would call an anti-war game. This is the closest we've gotten to an anti-war game, in my opinion. And for that reason, it's worth checking out. Coming up, next is Red Dead Redemption. This is the follow-up to Red Dead Revolver, even though Red Dead Redemption 2 is coming out. It's technically going to be the third game in the series. This is unique. This is probably considered the best Western game of all time. There are other Western games, not many, but there are. But this is the one that many people regard as the best. Next up, these are really hard to get out, by the way, I have them set up, is Mirror's Edge, the original Mirror's Edge, not Catalyst. And if you want to know how weird the controls are, LB is jump. You heard me right. LB is jump. Yeah, I just couldn't get into the controls. It's unfortunate because it looks what I've seen, it looks really fun, and it was unique at the time. Next up is a very underrated game. That seems to be a thing with Ninja Theory. Ninja Theory tends to make underrated games. Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. Very intense opening, really interesting story, good performances. This game deserved a lot more attention than it got, and it's become more of a cult following now, and for good reason. Next up is Brutal Legend. It got a lot of Game of the Year awards, but it didn't do too well sales-wise. But it's from Tim Schafer, so if you are a Tim Schafer fan or a Metal fan or both, take this up. Next up is Clive Barker's Jericho. I got it because Clive Barker's name was on it and it was cheap, so I figured why not get it. I started to play it and just never bothered to continue. I haven't heard a lot of good things about it, so. Get this out. If I can. Ow, 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 ow. Next up is Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 3. Where's Dead Space 2? I have it on PS2. Don't really like Dead Space 3 as much. I got it because my friend wanted me to play with him, so that's the only reason I have this one. But Dead Space 1 is where it's at. This This is probably the only big survival horror game that was around during the 7th gen. 7th gen was not good to survival horror, but this is the shining example of survival horror in that generation. Okay, we're almost done with the first row here, and if I can just get this thing off the bottom. Dead Rising, the first Dead Rising, and I was so disappointed in this game because this game could have been one of my favorites if I had been able to roam around the mall at my own leisure killing zombies. No. There's a story, it takes forever to kill a zombie, and you're timed. So, very disappointing. I heard they finally fixed it with 4, but it's a little too late because I'm tired of zombies now. Next up is Transformers War for Cybertron. This is probably considered the best Transformers video game series this and fall. Definitely worth picking up if you're a Transformers fan. Next up is Fear. This stands for First Encounter Assault Recon. And I love the atmosphere in this, but I felt the combat and the horror and the action didn't mix. I felt like the action and the horror were from 2 different games, and I just sandwiched them together. I prefer the atmosphere and the horror elements over the action elements, because that's just I just prefer that more. A lot of people really do like the action though, but I liked it more for the atmosphere and the horror. Next up is a game that was way too difficult. Lost Planet, Extreme Condition. Way too hard. Next up is the arcade compilation disc. It came with like Pac-Man Championship Edition, Uno, and some other games. Very cheap. That's why I picked it up. Next up is Ghostbusters, a video game, and this is essentially Ghostbusters 3. It has the actors from the movies, and this is probably the best Ghostbusters game you can ever play. Next up is Deus Ex Human Revolution, and this has a lot of great atmosphere, really good story, interesting ideas. If you love dark science fiction, this is worth picking up. Okay, what do we have here? Next up, we have Gears 2, Gears 3. Now, I have Gears 1 on Xbox One, and I have Judgment on downloaded. And I also have Gears 4 on Xbox One as well. So, yeah, Gears is great when it's simply a cover shooter, but when it gets too hard, it's during the set pieces. Okay, let's continue here. Next up is Alan Wake, very underrated game. It came out the same day as Red Dead Redemption, which really hurt it. And to be honest, I think having it exclusive to Xbox hurt it a bit as well, simply because story-based games don't really serve the Xbox audience well. The Xbox audience, especially the 360 audience, they were more into multiplayer, type of games and shooters and things like that. This is more of a story-driven thing. And this is one of the earliest games that had episodes before games became episodic on a regular basis. But you were able to play all the episodes on one disc when it came out. So a lot of people thought it was pointless. I thought it was interesting. And I think this game is interesting. So definitely pick it up if you like spooky stuff. Next up is Oblivion. I like Skyrim better, but Oblivion's still pretty good. Okay, let's see what's next. Next up is Black Ops 2. Got it because my friend had it, and we played this game quite a bit. This was his go-to game until we got his hands on GTA 5. Next up is Fable 2. Really liked how easy this game is. You can also choose to be good and evil. And, so yeah, Fable 2. What's next is Doom 3, and it came with the first two Doom games. So you can get those as well as this. Kind of get rid of the glare if I can. Doom 3. This Doom 3, I think, is like the scariest of them. You know, most Doom games are like fast-paced action, but this one is more of a horror game and more slow-paced and more atmospheric like that. Okay, what's next? Okay, here's a good one down here. Next up is the orange box that comes with Half-Life 2, and as well as the expansions for it, as well as Portal 2 and not Portal 2, Portal 1 as the original Portal, as well as Team Fortress 2. So if you're a Valve fan, you probably have this already. Alright, okay, we are at the last game on the second row. We have one more row after this to go. Grand Theft Auto 4 with episodes from Liberty City. This is one of my go-to games. I used to play this all the time, just explore the open world and have fun with it. I absolutely adore this franchise. Next up is my favorite franchise of the 7th gen, the Mass Effect trilogy. And the sad thing about Andromeda is people now are going, when they talk about Mass Effect, they're going to say, I prefer the original trilogy, because it's better, which it is. Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. Excellent games. Make sure you download the extended cut of the ending for Mass Effect 3 before you play it. If you do that, you will avoid a lot of the frustration that many gamers had when the game originally launched. But yeah, definitely pick up this must-own franchise. Next up is Dragon Age Origins. This is the Ultimate Edition. It comes with everything that was released for it. And it's BioWare, what can I say? Pick it up. Next up is South Park Stick of Truth. Fractured Butthole recently came out, interested in that. But this game really pushes the limits of the M rating. This probably should have been an AO. There are some shocking moments in this. This is probably the most shocking South Park experience you'll ever have. And it's one of the few tie-in games that work well. This looks exactly like you're playing the show. Exactly. And when Cartman, if you suck, Cartman will make fun of you, and that is priceless. Next up is Halo Reach. One of the very few Halo games that did not get re-released some way. And I really enjoy this game, especially Firefight. Really like Firefight on this. Next up is Bulletstorm. Very underrated game. Very satisfying kills, and if you get a chance, pick up the remaster if possible and support this game because it's worth it. And the story is surprisingly good. Max Payne 3, another dark action game that came out in 2012. Very, very, very gritty and dark, and that alone makes this worth picking up. Let's see what's next. Borderlands! Way too hard for me, but very entertaining. Really like Claptrap. Next up, we have Condemned, a launch title for the 360 and a horror game. And the melee is so brutal that it really adds to the scare factor and the dark atmosphere in this game. If you love horror games, pick it up. Next up, we have Bayonetta, the original Bayonetta. If you have a PS3 only, do not get this game for that system because it sucks on the PS3 because it was ported over by another party who sucked. But the 360 version is absolutely stunning and gorgeous to look at as well as fun to play. Definitely pick this up, but only if you have a 360 or a Wii U. And finally, the last disc-based game for the 360 is Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. Game where you just want to drive around and listen to music to. And that's exactly what I did. And that does it for my Xbox 360 game collections. And at some point, I want to do a digital download collection for all my consoles. But until then, here's one last look at my 7th gen disc-based game collections. If you can see them. Can you point at the bunny? I hope we did. Bye.